Imagine a desperate street girl, risking everything to save a millionaire from a deadly plot. Will she succeed against all odds? A street girl shouted to a millionaire, "Don't eat that, your wife put poison in it." On the way home to confront his wife, the millionaire was shocked to see what she was doing. The sun was beginning to set in the city, as Lyra stretched out her small, dirty hand towards the hurried pedestrians passing by on the sidewalk. Her bare feet, calloused from the hot asphalt, no longer felt pain. The cardboard she used as a home was folded under her arm, as she tried to catch the attention of the well-dressed passers-by, who avoided her gaze. "Please, ma'am, it's been 2 days since I've eaten, just a few coins to buy bread," she repeatedly murmured, her voice hoarse from begging so much. An elegant woman passing by, holding bags from famous brands, wrinkled her nose as Lyra approached her. The woman wore a blue silk ensemble, and her jewelry glistened in the evening light. Her high heels stopped abruptly when the girl gently touched her fur coat, trying to get her attention. "Don't you dare touch me again, you filthy thing. This coat cost more than you'll ever see in your entire life," the woman shouted, yanking her arm away. Lyra took a step back, but hunger and desperation were stronger than fear. "Ma'am, please, just a little food, I can work, I can clean your car, anything," the girl insisted, her voice choked up. "Work? You? Just look at yourself, you're dirty, stinking, you probably have lice and other diseases." "Guards, someone get this dirty girl out of here," the woman yelled. Her shrill voice attracted the attention of other pedestrians. What happens next will leave you speechless. Stay tuned to Dark Voices to find out. The elegant woman, seeing that she was creating a small audience, seemed to grow in her cruelty. She adjusted her jewel-covered fingers and looked at Lyra with disdain. "You're all the same, you only know how to beg and steal. Why don't you go find an orphanage?" "Oh, that's right, you'd have to follow rules there, wouldn't you? You prefer to be out here, dirtying our city," she said, her voice as cold as ice. "You don't know anything about me. You don't know why I'm on the street, you don't know what I've been through." Lyra replied, feeling her heart race, but finding a courage she didn't know she had. A circle of onlookers formed around them. The woman, realizing she had an audience, forcefully pushed Lyra, causing the girl to fall into a dirty puddle. "How dare you talk back to me? Guards, come quickly, this beggar is threatening me, she tried to rob me," the woman shouted mercilessly at the girl, who was still lying on the ground. "I never stole anything, I just wanted a little food," Lyra sobbed, as she tried to get up from the puddle, her only cardboard now soaked. The crowd began to murmur, some taking out their phones to film the scene. The elegant woman, seeing that not everyone seemed to approve of her attitude, changed her tactic. "Just look, now she's going to pretend to be the victim. I know her type well, she must be part of some gang, they use children to distract us while they steal our purses," the woman said. "That's a lie. The only bad person here is you, who has so much and doesn't help anyone." Lyra shouted, tears now freely running down her dirty face, as she quickly collected her sodden cardboard that had fallen into the puddle. Other pedestrians passed by, some laughing at the scene, others pretending nothing was happening. A security guard from the luxury store began walking towards her with an unfriendly look. "Why do they treat us like this? I didn't choose to be born poor, I didn't choose to live on the streets," she thought, as she quickly got up to flee from the guard. Running through the dark alleys, Lyra searched for a safe place to spend the night. The cold wind cut through her tattered clothes, and her stomach ached with hunger. She passed a group of other street kids who called out to her, but she didn't stop. "I can't join them, they always end up stealing the little I manage to get," she muttered to herself, clutching the few coins she'd earned during the day in her pocket. It was then that the smell of hot food reached her nostrils, making her stomach growl even louder. Lyra followed the aroma to the back of a luxurious restaurant, the Sterling. Her legs trembled with weakness as she approached the trash containers. "There's always good food here, I just need to be careful the staff don't see me," she thought, looking around to make sure she was alone. But what she discovers next changes everything. Don't miss this shocking twist, only on Dark Voices. Then, Lyra adjusted the ragged cap covering her disheveled black hair, while her small, agile hands began rummaging through the trash container behind the luxurious Sterling restaurant. Her almond-shaped eyes, marked by deep circles from sleepless nights on the city streets, quickly scanned the food scraps. The aroma of spices and grilled meat wafting out of the kitchen windows made her stomach growl, reminding her of her incessant hunger. Her trembling fingers found a piece of bread, still packaged, almost intact. If only people knew how much waste happens here, while out there so many people are hungry like me, she muttered to herself, tucking the bread into the pocket of her coat. The clatter of plates and cutlery caught her attention at the kitchen window, where the yellow light revealed the impeccable environment and staff in their crisp white uniforms. Lyra approached cautiously, her bare feet making no sound against the wet asphalt. Through the fogged glass, she could see the frantic movement of the cooks and waiters, all busy with their tasks. It's incredible how they look like ants working, each with their own job, without even noticing what's happening around them, she thought, gently pressing her nose against the cold window. An elegant woman entered the kitchen while the cooks and waiters were distracted. Her red dress contrasted with the predominantly white environment. Lyra recognized Grace Vanderbilt, wife of the famous businessman Silas Vanderbilt, whose photo frequently graced the magazines the girl found on the streets. Grace walked with the confidence of someone who knew that space well, her high heels echoing on the marble floor. What would a woman as rich as her be doing inside this kitchen? People like her usually don't mingle with the employees, Lyra reflected, feeling a growing curiosity. The staff didn't notice Grace's presence, too focused on their work. The woman approached one of the counters, where an elaborate dish was being finalized. Lyra watched as she took something from inside her designer handbag, a small, dark glass vial that glistened under the fluorescent light. It was undeniable that what was contained in that vial was something terrible. Please, may someone look at her, may someone notice what's happening, Lyra whispered, her heart starting to beat faster. With a quick and precise movement, taking advantage of the waiter's distraction as he talked to one of the cooks, Grace dropped a few drops of the dark liquid onto the dish. Her hands, covered in black lace gloves, did not tremble, demonstrating a calculated coldness that made Lyra shudder. My God, she's poisoning the food. How can someone be so cruel, the girl thought, feeling her blood run cold in her veins. The waiter turned his attention back to the dish, and Grace quickly put the vial back in her bag, maintaining a serene smile on her red-painted lips. Lyra watched in horror as the woman smiled, as if she were merely admiring the dish's presentation. I need to do something, I can't let this happen, Lyra muttered to herself, her body trembling not only from the cold but from fear and adrenaline. The girl moved away from the window, her wobbly legs barely sustaining her thin body, as she ran toward the restaurant's entrance. Her thoughts were in turmoil, trying to find a way to prevent the tragedy about to unfold. If I scream, no one will believe me, I'm just a street kid, who would listen to my words against hers, she reflected bitterly. Lyra's heart was beating so hard it seemed like it wanted to jump out of her chest, as she rounded the corner of the restaurant building. Her dirty hands clung to the exposed brick wall, seeking support, as she moved as fast as she could. Please, God, help me get there in time, I can't let someone die without doing anything, she whispered between gasping breaths. Upon reaching the restaurant's entrance, Lyra came face to face with a tall, burly security guard, whose stern gaze made her hesitate for a moment. Her tattered clothes and unkempt appearance contrasted sharply with the establishment's refined environment. Sir, please, I need to go in, it's an emergency, someone's going to die, she pleaded, her voice trembling with desperation. The guard firmly held her by the arm, blocking her entry. Lyra tried to break free, but her strength was insignificant compared to his. Tears began to stream down her dirty face, leaving clear trails on her cheeks. Let me go, you don't understand, there's an evil woman in there, she put poison in the food. Lyra shouted, her voice echoing through the restaurant's entrance. Inside the restaurant, through the glass doors, Lyra could see the waiter emerging from the kitchen with the fatal dish in his hands. Her eyes widened in horror, as she realized she was failing in her desperate mission to save a life. No, please, someone has to hear me, I think the woman is trying to poison Silas Vanderbilt, he's going to die if he eats that food, she shouted louder, her desperation growing by the second. The guard dragged her away from the entrance, while other staff members approached to see what was happening. Lyra kept struggling, desperately trying to make someone understand the gravity of the situation. Why doesn't he believe me? Just because I'm poor doesn't mean I'm lying, she thought in anguish. In the midst of the commotion, Grace elegantly emerged through the front door, probably hearing the girl's screams from outside. The elegant woman cast a disdainful look at the unfolding scene. Her eyes met Lyra's for a brief moment, and the girl could see a glint of threat in that seemingly serene gaze. "You won't get away with this, you evil witch!" Lyra shouted, as she was taken away. The waiter had already disappeared into the main dining room with the poisoned dish, and Lyra felt her hopes fade away. Her legs finally gave out, and she fell to her knees on the cold sidewalk, freeing herself from the guard and sobbing in frustration and helplessness. "What do I do now? How can I save someone when no one wants to let me in?" she whispered to herself, feeling completely defeated. Through her tears, Lyra saw Grace enter her luxurious car, a satisfied smile playing on her red lips. The girl felt a chill run down her spine, as she realized she was alone with this terrible secret. "It won't stay like this, I promise I'll find a way to prove the truth, even if it's the last thing I do," she vowed to herself, determination replacing despair in her voice. The sound of breaking plates inside the restaurant made Lyra quickly lift her head. Her heart raced again, wondering if the poisoned dish had reached its destination. The agony of uncertainty consumed her from within. "Please, may something have happened to prevent this tragedy," she murmured, her hands clasped in silent prayer. Lyra watched the movement at the restaurant entrance desperately, her hands trembling, as she tried to think of a way to get in. The security guard who had expelled her returned to his post, but seemed distracted by his cell phone. The girl noticed that he occasionally looked inside the restaurant, where soft music played, and people chatted animatedly, oblivious to the drama that was about to unfold. "I need to find a way to get in, I can't let that man die because of that evil woman," she whispered to herself, studying every move of the security guard. A group of elegant customers approached the entrance, catching the guard's attention, as he hurried to open the door for them. Lyra saw her opportunity. While the man greeted the newcomers, she could try to sneak behind them. Her heart was beating so hard, it felt like it was going to explode. "It's now or never, please, God, help me save that man," she muttered, adjusting her tattered cap and preparing to run. The guard turned to attend another customer arriving in a shiny black Mercedes, and Lyra seized the crucial moment. Her eyes, accustomed to seeking gaps in the streets to survive, quickly identified the safest path. With the agility that only a street child possesses, developed after years of escaping danger, she swiftly slid through the entrance. Her bare feet made no noise against the polished marble. Keeping low, she hid behind a sumptuous arrangement of white orchids in the lobby, her heart beating so hard she feared someone might hear it. "Where is he? I need to find him before it's too late, please, God, help me save him," she thought frantically, her wide eyes scanning the room, as her hands trembled uncontrollably. The luxurious environment made her feel even smaller and more insignificant, with its immense crystal chandeliers shedding golden light on elegant tapestries and expensive artworks. The contrast between her reflection in the gilded mirror on the wall, a dirty girl in tattered clothes, and the opulence of the place made her stomach churn. Lyra could hear the tinkling of crystal glasses and the soft sound of silver cutlery against fine porcelain, mixed with polite conversations and contained laughter. Little do they know that a murder is about to take place right under their noses. "I hope I can make it in time," she whispered to herself, feeling a mixture of anger and despair. The maitre d', a tall, slender man with a perfectly trimmed mustache, rushed past her, carrying a bottle of wine that probably cost more than she would ever see in her life. Lyra took advantage of his elongated shadow to move stealthily between the tables, like a small shadow herself. Her bare, dirty feet left small marks on the Persian red carpet, but she didn't care about the evidence she was leaving behind. Time was running out, and every second lost could mean the difference between life and death. "I can't fail now, not after coming this far," she muttered, her eyes frantically scanning the room for Silas. That's when she saw him. Silas Vanderbilt was sitting at a table in the center of the room, as if he were the main star of a tragic play about to unfold. His imposing figure in a bespoke navy blue suit contrasted with the snow-white tablecloth. He was examining the dish that had just been served, steam rising in sinister spirals from the poisoned food. A smile of approval was beginning to form on his lips, as he appreciated the presentation of the dish. "No, please, don't touch that food," Lyra thought desperately. "If only I could shout without that security guard stopping me from reaching him," her mind screamed, as she calculated the distance she would need to cover. Silas raised the silver fork, and time seemed to slow down for Lyra, as if the universe were prolonging that crucial moment. The light from the chandeliers reflected off the polished metal of the utensil, creating little dancing rainbows on the walls. She saw, as if in slow motion, the fork approaching the poisoned food. Her body reacted on pure instinct, driven by a force she didn't know she possessed. She ran from her hiding place like a wild animal, knocking over a tray of champagne, pushing chairs, and bumping into stunned waiters in the process. "Don't eat that, your wife put poison in it," she shouted with all the strength of her lungs, her hoarse voice echoing through the now tomb-silent room. But it was too late. By the time Lyra reached the table, shouting, Silas had already taken the first forkful to his mouth. His dark brown eyes met hers, a mixture of surprise and confusion on his well-groomed face. The fork fell from his trembling hand, clinking against the fine porcelain and breaking the momentary silence that had settled. "Who are you? What's going on?" he managed to stutter, his voice already starting to fail. Silas's face, once rosy and healthy, began to pale at an alarming rate. Large beads of sweat broke out on his forehead, trickling down his temples and staining the collar of his white dress shirt. His hands, now violently trembling, knocked over the glass of red wine that was nearby, the dark liquid spilling over the white tablecloth. "My God, someone help, he's feeling unwell," shouted an elderly lady at the next table. Silas tried to get up, leaning heavily on the table, but his legs seemed made of jelly. His eyes began to roll back in their sockets, showing only the whites, and his breathing became a distressing wheeze. Lyra, driven by a protective instinct, ran to support him, but her small body could barely bear the man's weight. "He needs help, please, someone do something," Lyra pleaded, her tears now mingling with sweat. Chaos had completely taken over the luxurious restaurant. A woman screamed hysterically when Silas began to writhe, his body seized by violent spasms. Plates fell and shattered, as people backed away in panic, children's cries mingling with the screams and exclamations of horror from the other patrons. "It was his wife, Grace, she put poison in the food, I saw everything through the kitchen window, help me save him," Lyra shouted amid the tumult. Silas's body began to convulse violently against the marble floor, where he had collapsed seconds earlier. His limbs thrashed with such force that no one could approach him. Lyra, desperate, tried to protect his head from hitting the ground. "Don't die, please don't die, I tried to warn you, I swear I tried," the girl sobbed. Silas's face was turning increasingly purplish, as his body twisted violently on the floor. A young waiter ran over with a glass of water, his hand shaking so much that half the liquid spilled before reaching them. "Water, we have to make him drink water," the desperate waiter shouted, trying to approach the convulsing man. "No, don't give him water, he could drown," Lyra yelled, pushing the glass away with a strength she didn't know she had. "We need to turn him on his side, he needs to breathe." Two other waiters tried to approach with wet napkins, but backed away in fright when Silas had a particularly violent spasm, knocking over another nearby table. The sound of shattering plates echoed through the room, mingling with the screams of terror from the patrons. "Hold that criminal here until the police arrive," the maitre d' ordered, his usually composed face now contorted with rage and fear. Lyra watched, powerless and desperate, as Silas's body continued to thrash on the marble floor. Her small hands, now trapped by the enormous hands of the security guard, could no longer help. Fat tears streamed down her dirty face as she saw the man she had tried to save fighting for his life. "Please believe me, the guilty one will get away, it was Grace, she planned all of this," her voice, already hoarse from shouting, could barely be heard amid the chaos. The sound of sirens began to approach, as Silas finally stopped thrashing, his body lying frighteningly still on the floor. The ensuing silence was more deafening than all the previous screams. Lyra felt her own body go limp in the security guard's arms, the adrenaline being replaced by a crushing fatigue. "Why does no one ever believe a street kid?" she whispered to herself as the red and blue lights began to illuminate the restaurant windows. Lyra felt an inexplicable strength take over her small body. With a sudden movement, she managed to break free from the guard holding her and ran toward Silas, who was still lying on the floor. Her years on the streets had taught her that in emergency situations, acting quickly was the difference between life and death. "Listen to me, I have an idea, I think I can help, I've seen this happen before," Lyra shouted, her voice carrying an authority surprising for someone so young. With quick, precise movements, learned from homeless people who often suffered seizures, she began to loosen Silas's tie and collar. Her small hands, so dirty, moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. He needs to breathe, move away anything that could hurt him, she ordered, removing nearby objects that could injure him during the convulsions. The restaurant customers formed a circle around them, some still filming with their cell phones, others shouting accusations. The maitre d' tried to pull Lyra away again, but she remained steadfast, protecting Silas with her own body. "If you're not going to help, at least don't get in the way, he's dying, and all you know how to do is film," shouted the girl, her words making some lower their phones in shame. Silas began to have more violent spasms, his face turning even more purple. Lyra knew she needed to act quickly. With a strength she didn't know she possessed, she managed to turn him on his side again, preventing him from choking. The marble floor was cold against her bare knees, but she felt no discomfort, focused solely on her mission. "Hold on, Mr. Silas, I won't let your wife's evil prevail," she whispered in his ear, while keeping his head protected. One of the security guards tried again to drag Lyra away, but this time, several customers intervened. "Let the girl help, she seems to know what she's doing," shouted an elderly lady, her voice trembling with emotion. The guard hesitated, his face a mask of confusion. "If he dies because you prevented me from helping, you'll all be guilty," declared Lyra, her voice laden with a maturity beyond her years. The following minutes were chaotic. While Lyra tried to help Silas, the restaurant staff argued among themselves about whether or not to call an ambulance and the police. The prejudice against the street girl was costing precious time. The convulsions began to subside, but Silas was still breathing with great difficulty. "Please, someone call an ambulance, he was poisoned, he needs medical help," Lyra implored, but the people seemed paralyzed. "Time is precious, I have no way to call an ambulance, I don't have a phone, I need to act quickly and do something right away, this gentleman needs a doctor," she thought, realizing that no one would take action. Lyra did the only thing she could. She decided to take Silas to the hospital herself. Her thin legs trembled with the effort, as she tried to lift the man. To her surprise, Silas began to partially regain consciousness. Who are you?" he mumbled, his voice almost inaudible, his eyes still unfocused. With steely determination, Lyra put Silas's arm around her shoulders. "I'm the person trying to save your life, sir, my name is Lyra, can you stand? We need to go to the hospital," she spoke firmly, ignoring the protests of the restaurant staff. "Don't let this girl take Mr. Vanderbilt, she must be involved in all of this, don't trust her," shouted the maitre d', but his voice already sounded distant. Silas, still dazed and confused, managed to stand with Lyra's help, his large body leaning heavily on the small girl, but she didn't complain. Each step was a battle, but she knew she couldn't give up. "Trust me, Mr. Silas, I know it's hard, but I'm the only person here who really wants to help you," she whispered, guiding him slowly towards the exit. The path to the door seemed endless. People tried to stop them, some employees threatened to call the police, but Lyra kept going, her determination greater than any obstacle. Silas stumbled with every step but managed to stay conscious. "Hospital, we need to go," he muttered, beginning to understand the gravity of his situation. At the restaurant exit, the security guard made one last attempt to stop them, positioning himself in front of the door. Lyra looked at him with a mixture of anger and pleading. "If you have a shred of humanity, you'll let us pass, he needs doctors, not accusations." "Let them go," said the same elderly lady from before, her voice now firm and authoritative. The cold night air hit their faces when they finally managed to get out. Lyra knew that the nearest hospital was a few blocks away. Each step was torture for Silas, who still had occasional spasms. "Just a little further, Mr. Silas, the hospital isn't far, and there they'll believe me when I tell them about your wife," Lyra spoke, both to encourage him and to keep him conscious. The streets were relatively empty at that hour, but the few pedestrians who passed looked frightened at the strange pair, a dirty street girl guiding a well-dressed man who could barely walk. Some offered help, but Lyra refused, fearing they might prevent her from telling the truth to the authorities. "I can't trust anyone now, I need to make sure he gets to the hospital alive, and that everyone knows it was Grace," she thought, as she continued her journey. Silas was getting worse with every block, his face alternating between deathly pale and purple hues, and his breathing was becoming more and more difficult. Lyra could feel his heart beating irregularly through his expensive suit. "Hang in there, I can already see the hospital lights, you're strong, you'll make it," she encouraged, even feeling her own muscles screaming with exhaustion. With each step they took, Lyra could hear sirens in the distance, probably from the police who'd been called to the restaurant. She knew she had to reach the hospital before they found her, or they would never believe her story. They won't believe me, my word as a street girl has no power, I'll hardly be able to prove what I saw, but this time, a street child will bring justice, she promised herself, quickening her pace as much as Silas could keep up. The city lights were beginning to turn on, casting long shadows on the sidewalks. Silas's weight seemed to increase with every moment, and Lyra could feel her own strength fading, but the memory of Grace's cruel smile kept her moving. Just 2 more blocks, Mr. Silas, when we get there, you'll get help, and everything will be alright, you'll be safe, and all this will be over, she murmured, more to herself than to him. Silas tried to say something, but could only emit a groan of pain. His eyes, though half-closed, remained fixed on Lyra, as if trying to understand how that little street girl was risking everything to save him. Don't try to speak now, save your strength, we'll be safe soon, she said, adjusting his arm better over her shoulders. A group of drunken youths blocked the sidewalk ahead, laughing loudly and occupying the entire space. Lyra knew she couldn't risk passing through them. Silas could barely stay on his feet, let alone dodge drunken people. We have to take another route, Mr. Silas, I know a shortcut, but it's down a darker street, she whispered, guiding him into a side alley. The alley was partially flooded due to recent rain, and the stench of garbage was suffocating. Lyra's bare feet sank into the dirty water, but she couldn't afford to choose another route due to the time it would take. Silas stumbled over a broken bottle, nearly bringing them both down. Watch your step, hold on to me, I can't let you fall now, she said firmly, her small body tensing to support more weight. A stray dog began barking furiously at them, advancing with bared teeth. Lyra knew this type of situation well. On the streets, vicious dogs were a constant danger. With one hand, she gestured for the dog to back off, keeping Silas balanced with the other. Go away, we don't have time for this, she yelled at the animal, her voice echoing off the alley walls. Emerging from the alley, they were met with a construction site blocking the street Lyra intended to use. Her heart sank, they would now have to take a much longer detour. Silas groaned in pain, his legs faltering again. I can't let you give up, I'll find another way, trust me, she pleaded, watching the beads of cold sweat trickling down the businessman's face. The sound of police sirens began echoing through the streets, and Lyra could see the lights reflecting off the windows of buildings they needed to hide, but Silas could barely move. She spotted a small convenience store and, on impulse, pulled him inside. Please, just a few minutes until the police pass, we can't let them find us before the hospital, she murmured, helping Silas lean against the counter. The store owner looked alarmed at the odd pair, a dirty girl and a well-dressed, clearly ill man. He opened his mouth to protest, but Lyra cut him off. He's sick, we just need to wait a few minutes, please. Lyra said, but the man ignored her. Get out of here before I call the police, I don't want any trouble in my store, he responded, already reaching for the phone. Forced outside, they found the street now crowded with people leaving work. Each jostle made Silas groan in pain, and Lyra had to struggle to keep him upright. A woman stopped to help, but upon seeing his condition, began asking too many questions. We don't have time for explanations, he needs to get to the hospital now. Lyra cut her off, pulling Silas away from the well-meaning woman. A police car slowly drove past them, and Lyra felt her heart stop. She quickly guided Silas behind a newspaper stand, praying they wouldn't be seen and she wouldn't be arrested for something she didn't do. The newspaper vendor eyed them suspiciously, but something in Lyra's determined eyes made him remain silent. If they find us now, they'll arrest me, and he'll die, I can't let that happen, she thought, holding her breath until the patrol car passed. Silas did his best to help, even in his near catatonic state. He walked with difficulty, leaning on the girl as little as possible, while she bravely assisted him. He tried to say something, likely an attempt at gratitude, but only managed an inaudible sound. You don't need to thank me, I would do this for anyone who needed help. I learned on the streets that we should help everyone, maybe because I myself need the help of kind people I meet along the way, she said, as much to distract him as herself. The lights of the hospital were already visible in the distance, like a beacon of hope in the dark night. Lyra could feel Silas reaching his limit, his body growing heavier against hers, almost collapsing with each step. Through the glass doors, she could see the chaos inside the emergency room, gurneys lining the hallways, people moaning in pain, and staff rushing back and forth. Please, let someone be able to help us, he can't wait much longer, she whispered to herself, feeling Silas grow heavier with each step. As they entered the lobby, they were met with a stifling, tense environment. The emergency room was packed. The security guard, a tall, burly man, immediately started walking toward them, his expression hardening as he took in Lyra's bedraggled state. "This is no place for beggars, go beg for change somewhere else," he bellowed, completely ignoring Silas's dire condition. Silas chose that moment to have another violent spasm, nearly bringing them both crashing to the floor. His face had now taken on an alarming purple hue. Lyra struggled to keep him upright, her legs trembling with the effort. "Can't you see he's dying? It's an emergency, he was poisoned," Lyra yelled, her voice echoing through the chaotic lobby. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with deep, dark circles under her eyes, didn't even lift her eyes from her computer screen. "Take a number and wait, all the doctors are busy with a multiple emergency from a highway accident," she said. "Can't you see he's dying? This is an emergency, he was poisoned," Lyra insisted, desperate. A second security guard approached, increasing the tension in the air. Silas began having more violent seizures, his heavy body slipping from Lyra's frail arms. The girl tried desperately to keep him upright, her legs trembling under the weight. "He's bleeding, oh my God, he's bleeding." Panic was evident in the girl's voice, as she tried to wipe the blood with her tattered sleeve. At that moment, an older nurse emerged from one of the corridors, carrying a stack of medical records. Her experienced eyes took in the scene, lingering first on Silas and then on Lyra. Her expression changed instantly. "Blessed Virgin, this is Silas Vanderbilt, the businessman," she exclaimed, dropping the medical records to the floor with a thud. The older nurse's eyes widened in recognition of Silas, her medical records forgotten on the floor. "My God, it's Silas Vanderbilt, call the doctor immediately," she shouted, running to examine the patient, but keeping a suspicious look towards Lyra. "Don't let that girl leave, she must have something to do with his condition," she ordered the security guards, who tightened their grip on the child's arms even more. Silas began having an even more violent seizure, his entire body shaking against the hospital's cold floor. The nurse shouted orders, as other staff rushed in with equipment. Lyra tried to explain, but her voice was drowned out by the commotion. "He was poisoned, I tried to help him, he got a little better, but he's getting worse again," Lyra explained, but most of the staff ignored her completely. A heart monitor was rushed in, and the sound of Silas's irregular heartbeats filled the air. Lyra watched helplessly, as the nurses worked, connecting electrodes and checking his vital signs. No one even looked in her direction. "The heartbeats are getting weaker, where's the doctor?" one of the nurses shouted, her hands moving quickly over Silas's body. The businessman began exhibiting more alarming symptoms. His skin took on a bluish hue, and his breathing became shallower by the minute. The security guards kept holding Lyra, who struggled desperately. "He's going to die if you don't act fast, the poison was dark, I saw her put it in." Her words were lost in the chaos of the emergency room. Finally, the doctor arrived, running down the hallway. Upon seeing Silas, he immediately began shouting orders. "Emergency room 3, now! This case looks like poisoning, call the police, we need to know what happened to him," the doctor said, assessing the patient. "The police have already been called, doctor, this girl was with him, she probably has something to do with it," one of the security guards replied. Lyra felt her heart sink when she heard sirens approaching. She knew no one would believe her story, that her word was worthless. She was a beggar, they would never believe Grace Vanderbilt could be capable of such wickedness against her husband, especially with the power she had. Silas was being rushed down the hallway, and Lyra could do nothing. "If he dies, it's your fault for not listening to me," she shouted, tears of anger and frustration streaming down her dirty face. The sound of the machines grew more frantic, and Lyra could hear the doctor's alarmed voices as they took Silas away. Another violent seizure shook his body on the gurney, and the doctors ran alongside him. "Blood pressure plummeting, we need immediate treatment," the doctor's voice echoed down the hallway. The doors of the emergency room opened again, and several police officers entered. Lyra panicked, feeling her heart racing in her chest. One of the officers immediately pointed at her. "This beggar brought a poisoned millionaire to the emergency room, she probably did something to him," the security guard said, then turned to Lyra. "Now you won't escape, you little brat," he finished, tightening his grip on her arm even more. Silas's body disappeared behind the emergency room doors, leaving Lyra alone in the lobby, surrounded by accusing looks. The sound of medical equipment was replaced by the jingling of handcuffs. Why does no one ever believe a street child, she thought bitterly, as the officers approached. The sound of the hospital's automatic doors opening and 3 police officers entering the emergency room, their heavy boots echoed across the ceramic floor, and their impeccable uniforms contrasted with the chaotic hospital environment. The oldest officer, with graying hair and a stern expression, immediately located Lyra. "We received a report that a citizen was poisoned. His name is Mr. Vanderbilt, a local businessman. They said he was brought in by a beggar." "Was it you?" the officer asked, and immediately one of the hospital security guards pointed at Lyra, who was still looking at the emergency room doors, worried about Silas. The officers approached like predators surrounding their prey. Lyra felt her heart race, but remained steadfast, even when the tallest officer grabbed her arm with unnecessary force. The smell of sweat and fear mingled with the hospital's antiseptic scent. "You have a lot of explaining to do, girl. What did you do to Mr. Vanderbilt?" asked the older officer, his stale coffee breath making Lyra instinctively recoil. The officers dragged Lyra down the hospital corridor, ignoring her protests. Other patients and staff watched the scene with a mixture of curiosity and disapproval. The girl tried to break free, but the grip on her arm was too strong. "I didn't do anything, I'm trying to save his life. It was his wife, Grace. I saw her put the poison in his food at the Sterling restaurant," Lyra shouted, her voice echoing off the white walls. Lyra was taken to a small room in the hospital. The officers shoved her into a hard plastic chair, while the older officer pulled up another chair to sit across from her. His hard eyes studied every move the girl made. "Let's start from the beginning. Why were you at the Sterling restaurant?" "That's no place for people like you," he said, emphasizing the last words with disdain. Lyra took a deep breath, trying to control the tremor in her voice. She recounted again how she had been looking for food behind the restaurant, about seeing Grace through the kitchen window, about the dark liquid being poured onto the plate. The younger officer took notes, occasionally exchanging skeptical glances with his colleagues. "So, you want us to believe that Mrs. Grace Vanderbilt, known for her philanthropic work, tried to poison her own husband, and only you, a beggar, saw it happen?" the sergeant questioned, his voice laden with disbelief. The interrogation continued for several minutes, the same questions being asked repeatedly in different forms, trying to find contradictions in her story. Lyra kept her account consistent, but could feel that each word was met with more disbelief. "Why would you care about saving his life? What do you gain from it?" the younger officer asked, his tone suggesting hidden motives. It was at this moment that the sound of high heels began to echo down the corridor, approaching rapidly. Lyra felt her blood run cold as Grace Vanderbilt entered the small room like an actress taking the stage, her eyes reddened from carefully manipulated tears. "I was informed by the hospital that my husband was brought to the emergency room. What did this criminal do to him?" Grace asked, her voice choked with emotion that Lyra knew to be false. Grace moved around the room like a snake about to strike, her high heels marking each step with calculated precision. Her red dress, the same one from the restaurant, now seemed even more menacing in Lyra's eyes. The woman approached the officers, her perfectly manicured hands trembling in a studied display of distress. "My poor Silas," Grace began, her voice dripping with anguish. "I had an issue to take care of while we were eating at the restaurant and had to leave earlier, letting him finish his meal. I didn't think they would let people like this beggar get near the restaurant. They always want more than just food," Grace said, casting a venomous glare at Lyra. Sergeant Ramirez offered his chair to Grace, who sat down with rehearsed grace. Her eyes, previously feigning tears, now gleamed with a malice that only Lyra seemed to perceive. The girl felt her stomach churn as the woman began to speak again. "I saw this girl lurking around the restaurant several times today. I had to take a call in the middle of the meal. That's when I saw her. Silas has always been so kind. He must have put something in his food when no one was looking to try and rob him," Grace declared, her voice trembling just the right amount. Lyra tried to stand up, indignant at the lies, but the younger officer shoved her back into the chair with force. The bitter taste of injustice filled her mouth as Grace continued her performance. "She's lying. I saw her putting the poison. It was a dark liquid she took out of her purse," Lyra shouted, her voice hoarse with desperation. Grace brought her hands to her face in an Oscar-worthy performance. "See how she lies? She's probably part of some gang, They must have planned to kidnap my Silas, she sobbed, making the officers exchange meaningful glances. Please, ask the waiters at the restaurant, they must have seen when she entered the kitchen. Lyra pleaded, feeling hot tears stream down her dirty face. The sergeant gestured to the younger officer, who immediately took position behind Lyra's chair. The metallic sound of the handcuffs being prepared made the girl's heart race. We have a respectable witness against the word of a street urchin, declared the sergeant, his voice laden with prejudice. The sergeant leaned forward, his face inches from Lyra's, the smell of stale coffee on his breath making the girl want to recoil, but she stood firm, holding the officer's gaze. How does a street urchin know Mrs. Vanderbilt's name? How did you know that was Silas Vanderbilt? He questioned, his voice heavy with suspicion. Lyra tried to explain about the magazine she found on the streets, that she used some to cover herself, about how everyone knew the Vanderbilts, but the younger officer interrupted her. How convenient, isn't it? Knowing precisely one of the richest men in the city, he said, exchanging meaningful glances with the sergeant. The third officer, who had been silent until then, approached with a tablet. Look what I found, 3 cases of thefts at luxury restaurants in the last month. In all of them, a street girl was seen lurking around before, he declared, showing the news on the screen. It wasn't me, I've never stolen anything in my life, I just look for food they throw away. Lyra protested, feeling tears begin to form. Grace brought her hands to her chest in a theatrical gesture. Just last week, I lost an extremely expensive bracelet at another restaurant. Who knows, she insinuated, making the officers exchange glances again. Can't you see she's lying? Why would I save her husband if I wanted to rob them? Lyra argued desperately. The sergeant took out his notepad. Maybe that's the question. You weren't trying to save him, you barged into the restaurant, screaming about poison, caused panic, seems like a perfect distraction for something bigger, he theorized, his voice laden with certainty. Exactly. Grace exclaimed, a single, perfectly timed tear running down her face. She must be part of some gang. Using children is so common in these cases. Lyra looked from one face to another, searching for any sign of doubt, any crack of empathy, but she found only hard, accusing expressions. Grace had succeeded, her word as a wealthy, respectable adult had completely destroyed any chance of Lyra being heard. I hope you make this criminal pay for what she did, Grace said, walking towards the door with the elegance of someone who had just won a battle. The truth will come out, he'll get better and tell you it was you. Don't you see that while you waste time accusing me, she might try to hurt him again? Lyra tried one last time, her voice almost a whisper. Grace stood up, smoothing her dress with a discreet smile on her red lips. I need to see my husband now, she said. Lyra shouted, struggling when she felt the officer's hands on her wrists. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into Lyra's delicate skin, the click of the lock sounding like a final sentence. The younger officer yanked her up from the chair, while she was still trying to make herself heard. Please, someone has to believe me, she's going to try to hurt him again, her voice broke into sobs. The sound of the handcuffs seemed to echo through the hospital corridors, as Lyra was led away from the small room, handcuffed. Grace, near the door, her cruel smile hidden behind a silk handkerchief she used to dab at non-existent tears. Other patients and hospital staff stopped to watch the scene. I hope you learn to keep these people away from decent establishments, Grace said loudly enough for everyone to hear, prompting murmurs of approval from those present. The officer shoved Lyra down the hallway, her small legs barely able to keep up with his long strides. Through her tears, she could still see the emergency room doors where Silas was fighting for his life. The sound of the medical machines reached her, muffled. You won't be able to hurt him again. When he wakes up, he'll tell the truth. Lyra shouted to Grace, who was already making her way to the emergency wing with her elegant gait. A commotion at the emergency room doors caught everyone's attention. The medical team was rushing back and forth, and the machines started beeping more intensely. Lyra felt her heart sink as she heard the doctor's shouts for more medication. No, I need to stay, he might be getting worse, please, the girl begged, trying to break free, but the handcuffs only hurt her wrists more. Grace seized the moment for her final performance. She ran towards the emergency room, her high heels echoing dramatically down the hallway. Save my husband, don't let this criminal take another innocent life, she cried out, eliciting gasps of compassion from those present. The only criminal here is you, murderer, liar. Lyra shouted, now being dragged away by 2 officers. The hospital doors loomed closer, and with them, the terrible reality that Lyra had failed in her mission. Not only had she not managed to completely save Silas, but now it would be impossible to protect him from Grace's second attempt. If he dies, the blame will be on all of you who wouldn't listen, his blood will be on your hands. Her words echoed through the lobby, as she was taken away. The cold night air hit her face, as the automatic doors opened, the police car lights still flashing, casting dancing shadows on the hospital walls. Lyra cast one last look back, only to see Grace disappear through the emergency room doors. "You won't win, Grace, the truth always comes out, no matter how long it takes," the girl shouted one last time, before being shoved into the police car. The sound of the vehicle door closing was like a period at the end of her freedom. Through the fogged-up glass, Lyra watched the hospital where she left not only Silas but also her only chance for justice. The sirens began to wail, and the car started moving. Why does the world prefer to believe beautiful lies rather than difficult truths, she thought bitterly, as silent tears streamed down her dirty face. In the hospital's emergency room, doctors and nurses scurried back and forth, desperately trying to save Silas's life. The machines surrounding the bed made loud, frightening noises, with lights constantly flashing, showing that something was very, very wrong with him. Silas, still wearing his nice suit, now drenched in sweat, trembled and twitched, as if fighting against something invisible inside him. "His blood pressure is dropping too fast," shouted one of the nurses, looking scared at the machines. "The usual medications aren't working at all." The doctor, the hospital's oldest and most experienced physician, took charge of the situation. He had seen many similar cases over the years and knew he had to act quickly if he wanted to save Silas's life. "Everyone, let's try something different," he said in a firm, calm voice amidst all the chaos. "Prepare the broad-spectrum antidote immediately." The team sprang into action, fetching medications, equipment, and everything else that might be needed. The air in the room felt heavy, but they were relentless, knowing each second was crucial. "We're losing him," shouted one of the younger doctors, his voice trembling with fear. But the lead doctor remained focused, unwavering. With utmost care, he administered the antidote to Silas and began other emergency procedures. "Come on, Mr. Silas," he muttered softly, looking at his pale face, "fight with all your might, you're a strong man, I know you can do it." The minutes dragged by, feeling like hours, as the medical team continued their efforts, watching for any sign of improvement. Gradually, the medications began to take effect. Silas's blood pressure stabilized, and his breathing became steadier. The alarms quieted, as the machines indicated he was responding. "Look, his vitals are improving," said a nurse with a relieved smile. "His heart rate is stabilizing." The lead doctor let out a long, relieved sigh. "Everyone, you did an amazing job. Silas is not out of danger yet, but we're on the right track. Let's keep monitoring him closely." Hours passed, with the team taking turns watching over Silas, measuring his blood pressure, checking his heart, and making sure the antidote continued working. Finally, after intense rounds of care, the doctor decided it was safe to move Silas to a private room where he could rest and recover. "There you go, Mr. Silas," said the nurse, fluffing the pillows to make him comfortable. "Now you can rest, but don't worry, we're nearby taking care of you." Silas remained unconscious, his breathing soft and steady, the machines around him making a constant, reassuring hum. The doctors and nurses continued to observe him, relieved by his progress, whispering among themselves about how close they'd come to losing him. As the hospital quieted down for the night, a shadow slipped into Silas's room, a figure dressed in a long, black coat, with a cold, calculating look. It was Grace, watching him with a twisted smile, as he lay unaware and vulnerable. Well, dear," she whispered, running a gloved finger along his pale face, "you're more resilient than I imagined." She held up a small vial filled with a dark, viscous liquid, the same one she'd used at the restaurant. "Perhaps you need an extra dose to help you finally rest." She leaned closer, carefully uncorking the vial, the acrid smell filling the room. But just as she prepared to administer the poison, she heard footsteps in the hall. Quickly, she slipped the vial back into her pocket, turning just as the doctor entered the room. With flawless composure, Grace assumed a look of concern. "Oh, doctor," she exclaimed, feigning relief, "I was so worried about my husband. Is he going to be all right?" The doctor observed her with a skeptical eye, but returned his attention to Silas. "We're doing everything possible, ma'am. Your husband is stable, but he needs rest and continuous care." Of course, Grace nodded, carefully masking her irritation. I understand. I'll do whatever I can to help with his recovery. Good, said the doctor, still watching her, a subtle hint of distrust in his gaze. If you'll excuse me, I need to check his vitals now. You can wait outside, I'll update you shortly. With a forced smile, Grace left the room, pausing only to cast one last venomous look at Silas. She was thwarted for the moment, but wasn't giving up. Leaving the hospital, she planned her next move, still determined to secure the fortune she believed was rightfully hers. Meanwhile, Silas remained in a peaceful sleep, oblivious to the danger hovering around him, dreaming of better days. The strength within him, the will to live, would prove stronger than any poison or ill intent. But for now, he rested, unaware of the shadow lingering just beyond the hospital walls. In a dark holding cell across town, Lyra sat quietly, her knees drawn to her chest, staring at the cold, gray floor. The detective's harsh words still rang in her mind. If Silas dies, you'll be charged with murder. It was an early conviction for a girl who'd only wanted to help, a punishment for doing the right thing. She swallowed hard, trying to contain the tears that threatened to fall, feeling the weight of helplessness and hopelessness pressing down on her. They've already decided I'm guilty, even without proof, she thought bitterly, her heart aching with loneliness and despair. The sound of the detective's fingers tapping on the metal table broke the silence. He looked at her with the weariness and disdain of someone who'd already made up his mind. Your story doesn't make sense, you know that, right? He asked, a street girl with no proof, accusing a woman like Grace Vanderbilt of poisoning her own husband? Lyra met his gaze, her eyes reddened from holding back tears. She knew exactly who she was up against. Grace was powerful, influential, and held the world in her grasp, but that didn't change the truth. I saw what I saw, I'm not lying, Lyra said, her voice soft but unwavering. The detective scoffed, rising from his chair to pace the room. You think anyone will believe you, girl? Grace has lawyers, power, influence, and you have nothing, just your word against hers. Lyra clenched her fists, feeling the truth and her helplessness battle within her. She had nothing but the truth, and she knew that one day, somehow, it would come to light. I have nothing, but I have the truth, she whispered, and no matter how hard she tries to hide it, the truth always comes out. The detective stopped walking, a look of exasperation on his face. You really think a street girl like you can beat someone like Grace Vanderbilt? He laughed dryly. This world isn't a fairy tale, girl. In the real world, power wins. But despite his words, Lyra's resolve didn't waver. If she gave up now, Grace would win, and Silas would die without the truth ever being known. I tried. If he dies, it won't be my fault, Lyra said, holding her chained wrists up for him to see. It will be because you didn't want to listen. You chose to believe the lies of a rich woman. The detective rolled his eyes, signaling the officers outside to return her to her cell. We'll see, girl. Without proof, you stay here, he said. As Lyra was led back to her cold, empty cell, she felt despair weighing her down, but even with the odds against her, she refused to give up. Silas's life depended on the truth coming out, and no matter how bleak it seemed, she would fight for it. Alone in her cell, with only the faint morning light filtering through a tiny window, she waited. She could only hope that Silas would wake up and remember the truth. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor. Lyra looked up, her heart pounding, as the door opened. The same detective entered, his face unreadable. Silas Vanderbilt woke up, he said, his voice low and grave. Lyra felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. He survived, her voice was barely above a whisper. The detective gave a slight nod. Yes, but he hasn't said anything yet. He's weak, and his condition is still critical, but he's alive. A wave of relief washed over Lyra. Silas was alive, despite everything, he had survived. We'll see what he has to say, the detective continued. Until then, you're still locked up here. Don't think this changes things, not until we know the truth. Lyra nodded, her heart pounding. He'll tell the truth, he has to. Her voice was filled with a quiet, desperate determination. The detective walked away, and the cell door closed again, but this time, Lyra felt something different, a glimmer of hope. Silas was alive, and as long as he was, there was a chance for her to be believed. Days passed slowly, each hour blending into the next. Finally, one morning, Silas began to stir, as if emerging from a dense, confusing dream. The hospital room was silent, except for the steady hum of machines around him. His body felt heavy, and every muscle ached, as though he'd been carrying an invisible weight for too long. Blinking to adjust to the light filtering through the window, he tried to make sense of where he was. His memories were blurry, fragmented. He remembered the restaurant, the food, then the pain, and then Lyra. The image of the street girl flashed through his mind. "I'm alive," he whispered to himself, his voice hoarse and weak. The door opened, and two doctors entered, accompanied by a nurse. They looked cautious, professional, but Silas could sense a certain hesitance in their expressions. "Mr. Vanderbilt," one of the doctors began gently, "you were in critical condition, you were poisoned, but we managed to stabilize you in time. Your recovery will be long, but you're out of immediate danger." "Poisoned?" Silas repeated, his mind reeling. "How? Who?" He struggled to sit up, but a wave of dizziness forced him back down. "Don't overexert yourself," warned the doctor, adjusting the devices by his bed. "The poison caused severe damage, but fortunately, your response to the treatment was positive." As Silas processed the information, fragments of memory began to resurface. He recalled the pain, the panic, and the girl who tried to save him. "There was a girl," he murmured, his voice faint. "She tried to help me. Where is she?" The doctors exchanged glances before responding cautiously. "There's no record of any girl visiting you, Mr. Vanderbilt. The only visitor listed is your wife." "No, there was a girl." Silas insisted, his voice growing stronger with urgency. "She shouted something. She knew something was wrong." The doctors tried to reassure him, attributing it to confusion and fatigue, but Silas was certain. He struggled to make sense of it, feeling as though he was missing a vital piece of the puzzle. "Find her," he pleaded. She tried to save me." After the doctors left, Silas lay in silence, frustration simmering beneath the surface. He knew the girl was real. He could still hear her voice, still see her terrified expression as she warned him. She had risked everything for him. The nights that followed were restless. Each time he closed his eyes, he would see fragments of the evening play out in his mind. He could still taste the bitterness of the poison, still feel the chill of terror, but Lyra's image was the clearest of all, a girl who had saved him against impossible odds. On the morning of his discharge, Silas convinced the doctors he was well enough to leave. Though his body was still weak, his mind was made up. He needed to find the girl who had saved his life. Stepping outside, he felt the weight of responsibility settle upon him. Lyra was out there, somewhere, possibly in trouble, and he owed her more than he could ever repay. He got into his car, his heart pounding with urgency, and knew exactly where to go: the Sterling. Traffic seemed to move at an agonizingly slow pace. Every second felt like an hour, as Silas made his way back to the restaurant, hoping against hope that his instincts were correct. Finally, he arrived, parking hastily and heading toward the back alley. The restaurant was just beginning to open, and the scent of food wafted from the kitchen. Silas's pulse quickened as he approached the area where Lyra had last been seen, and then he heard it, a voice, faint but unmistakable, a voice pleading, "Please, just a bit of food, I'm so hungry." He turned the corner, and there she was, digging through the trash, her small figure almost disappearing among the bins. She looked thinner, her face weary, but it was unmistakably her. "Lyra," he called softly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, her eyes widening in disbelief. For a moment, she seemed ready to flee, but then recognition dawned, and she froze. "Mr. Silas, you're alive," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes," he replied, stepping closer. "Thanks to you, you saved my life, Lyra." The words seemed to reach her, and a flicker of relief crossed her face, quickly replaced by a shadow of fear. "But they arrested me. They said I tried to hurt you." "I didn't, I only wanted to help," she said, her voice breaking. "I know," Silas said gently, reaching out a hand. "I remember everything, and I'm here to make things right." Lyra stared at him, hope beginning to replace the fear in her eyes. Silas knew then that he had found her, not just physically, but in spirit. Here was a girl who had risked everything for him despite the danger and the odds. "I won't let them hurt you, Lyra," he promised, his voice filled with a quiet determination. "You're coming with me, you're safe now." And as they left the alley, a new journey began, one of healing, redemption, and a chance at a life neither of them could have imagined. Together, they would face the truth, and together, they would rebuild from the ashes. Days passed, and true to his promise, Silas began to fulfill his commitment to Lyra. He brought her to his home, a place she'd only ever dreamed of, a mansion far removed from the streets that had been her entire world. Though she was initially hesitant, overwhelmed by the size and grandeur of the estate, Silas's gentle guidance helped her find a sense of belonging she had never known before. With time, Lyra settled in, her days no longer filled with fear and hunger, but with new opportunities. Silas, too, found himself changed by her presence. For the first time in years, his home felt warm, filled with laughter, and free of the tension that had existed during his marriage to Grace. He became a father figure to Lyra, guiding her and nurturing her potential, grateful every day for the chance she'd given him to see life through new eyes. As weeks turned into months, the bond between them grew. Silas arranged for Lyra to receive tutoring, opening doors to education she'd never dreamed of, and he encouraged her to explore her interests. For Lyra, this world of books, art, and learning was as foreign as it was exhilarating. She threw herself into her studies with determination, driven by a desire to make the most of the opportunity Silas had given her. One evening, after they had finished dinner, Lyra hesitantly approached Silas in his study. "Mr. Silas," she began, then paused, nervous. Silas looked up from his book, smiling. "You can call me Dad, you know," he said. She blushed, then nodded. "I wanted to ask, do you think the truth will ever come out about Mrs. Grace?" Silas's face grew serious, the mention of his estranged wife casting a shadow. "The police are still investigating, but it's difficult. Grace is clever, and with her connections, proving her involvement hasn't been easy," he said. Lyra looked down, disappointed. I don't want her to hurt anyone else," she said. Silas reached over, gently lifting her chin so she met his gaze. "I promise you, Lyra, she won't. We'll make sure she doesn't hurt anyone else, and even if justice is slow, I have faith that one way or another, the truth will come out." True to his word, Silas continued pressing the police to dig deeper into Grace's activities. Gradually, evidence surfaced: hidden bank accounts, suspicious transactions, and testimonies from people who had witnessed her mistreatment of others. Piece by piece, Grace's carefully constructed facade began to crumble, revealing a web of manipulation and deceit that had allowed her to evade accountability for years. Finally, the day came when Grace was brought to trial. Lyra and Silas attended, and as they sat in the courtroom, they watched the woman who had once held Silas's life in her hands stand before a judge. For Lyra, seeing Grace stripped of her power and influence felt surreal. She was no longer the intimidating figure Lyra had feared, but a woman facing the consequences of her actions. As the trial proceeded, Grace's web of lies unraveled. Witnesses came forward, recounting her manipulation and cruelty. The prosecution presented evidence of her attempts to poison Silas, her plan to alter his will, and her attempts to frame Lyra. Piece by piece, the truth came to light. In the end, Grace was found guilty of multiple charges, including attempted murder. She was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, and though her influence had once seemed unassailable, she left the courtroom disgraced and powerless. For Lyra and Silas, justice brought a sense of closure. The weight of the past lifted, and they were free to move forward without the shadow of Grace looming over them. Their journey from fear and betrayal to redemption and healing was complete. From that day forward, Silas and Lyra dedicated themselves to helping others who had suffered in silence, just as Lyra once had. Together, they turned their story into a mission, creating a foundation to support children without families and offering a safe haven for those who, like Lyra, had been overlooked by society. And so, what had begun as a tale of survival and resilience became one of hope, family, and the transformative power of kindness. Lyra's life, once defined by hardship, now held promise, and with Silas by her side, she faced the future with courage and joy. Their bond, born out of adversity, would remain unbreakable, a reminder that even in the darkest times, light and love could be found. Did you enjoy this story? If yes, drop a like and a nice comment to encourage us. Don't forget that we love you here at Dark Voices.